Guys, it is time for me to continue my journey through the Red Rising saga with Dark Age. Now, here's the thing about this book. This is possibly the most polarizing book I am going to read this year, potentially because every single person I talk to has a different opinion of it. Some people absolutely love it. It's their favorite book in the series. Other people absolutely hated it. It's their least favorite book in the series. I have no idea where I'm gonna land. I've managed to keep myself pretty spoiler free, so I really don't know what happens in this book other than the fact that it is very aptly named Dark Age. Apparently this book is going to really put me through the ringer emotionally, and that it is very, very, very dark. So let's just go. I have no predictions. I'm just going in, and it's gonna be a great time. So bringing you along with me on the journey once again for Dark Age. Okay, so I've just read through the prologue, and excuse my hair, it's been a crazy day. That was a sucker punch of a prologue. One of the things that Pierce Brown does that I think is amazing is writing really tight-knit groups, combat groups, in combat, and how they play off of each other. And I think he's done that since Red Rising, but he's getting better and better and better at writing it, and that has been really cool to read. This book is going to be really dark, and I don't know what that means exactly because there's a lot of different types of dark, right? Are we talking character deaths? Are we talking horrible, awful things? Are we talking about really specific, painful moments with characters, physical, emotional torture? Like, what are we talking? What does dark entail? And I know I'm about to find out, but my heart's kind of in my throat. Okay, I'm in the first Lysander POV, and I have things to say. First of all, I really, really loved the conversation at the beginning chapter with Orion and Darrow. And I love how Orion is basically kind of the manifestation of Darrow's emotional detachment, or his attempted emotional detachment from all of this, and trying to like really press down his desire to just go back to Mustang and Pax, and his pain at losing Severo and all of this stuff. And I really liked that moment we got with Orion and seeing her vulnerable in her own way with Darrow. Lysander is going to be a really tough sell for me in this book because I hated that he basically became like a plot device character at the end of book 4. I felt like his motivation for turning against or allying himself with Dido and Atalantia, etc., was really like vague and weak, and I really didn't like it. And the fact that he was willing to so quickly sacrifice Cassius, it was just a lot of things where I was like, I don't feel like I got a build up to this at all, and I don't feel like it makes sense, and I don't feel like he's the character that was built up through this entire book. I felt like it was like, this is the plot thing that needs to happen, so we're just gonna make him do it. And there's a lot of that in Lysander's POV, not just with him, but also like Seraphina. Seraphina is an awful character. I really don't like her because, again, she and Lysander had built up this whole like kind of at least friendship, sort of, not really friendship, but like getting to know each other and trusting each other in certain ways. And like the way she flipped so quickly and just is stubbornly sticking to, like, she's so one note at this point, like, oh, you suck, oh, you suck, did I mention you suck, like, to Lysander. She's such, like, I'm so over her character. I'm hoping that she doesn't survive, which is horrible, but I'm just like, no thank you. Diomedes is very interesting. I like his character, and I wish that Lysander's POV chapters were from his POV, because I think that would be way more interesting. But yeah, Lysander's really not doing it for me. Hi. All right, so here's the thing. I'm about 6 chapters in and finished chapter 6. And my thing with Lysander coming out of Iron Gold, which I talked about before, I'm really loving getting the opposite side of perspective from Darrow and the Republic. And that part I love. The problem I'm having is that pretty much any of the other characters now around Lysander, with the exception of Seraphina, I would prefer getting a perspective from them. Like Lysander specifically, I'm not loving. And I get that he's like a symbol of the old society and that he represents like kind of the second generation of what Darrow was fighting in the beginning of the series, and that's fine. But I'm so disconnected from him as a character at this point that I would love, like Diomedes would be an amazing POV, I think. And I recognize that the reason that probably doesn't work is because Diomedes doesn't have the intimate relationship with, you know, Atalantia and Ajax, etc., that Lysander does. So Lysander allows us to get like further into the know of what's going on. So I get that. Like I understand from a writing perspective why Diomedes probably wouldn't work. But even Ajax, or like Atalantia as the Ash Lord's daughter, or Ajax as Asia's son, like, I don't know. I get why he's the POV character. I just would rather see somebody else's POV. Darrow continues to be pretty good, actually better so far, better in Dark Age than I liked him in Iron Gold. There's a lot of information. There's so much information coming at me in this book, you guys. Like I'm trying to follow everything. It's a lot. There's a lot going on and it's moving very quickly. So, which is weird because I feel like Iron Gold moved a little bit more slowly. So already the pace in Dark Age is much faster. So anyways, that's where I'm at. I'm going to read some more today, but those are just my initial thoughts on Dark Age. Okay. So I'm a good chunk into the story already. I'm on just finished chapter 14. So far it's just Darrow and Lysander POVs that we're going through, which is fine because they're at the heart of the conflict. But like, on one hand, the tactics and the combat are making my military science fiction fantasy heart very happy. On the other hand, this is just, everything's so leveled up from the original series. Like, yeah, it was universal even at that point, but this is just so much bigger. Like the machines they're using are bigger, the scale is bigger. I miss some of the more like, I felt like I was more in the dirt with the characters in the first series than I do in this one. But I recognize that we're on such an epic scale at this point that it makes sense to some degree. Seraphina just died, which I know I just said in the beginning of the video or the vlog that I wasn't a fan of her and I wouldn't be mad about that. It was still a gut punch. Like, it was so fast. And I think I appreciate when an author who's writing military and combat like this shows how realistic that is, that like it's not always a pretty like lead up to somebody, oh, you just know somebody. Sometimes it's just, most of the time it's just completely out of nowhere because it's random and you can't control who's going to get hit by what at any given time. And so I like that he's utilizing that here, because now that's two characters, Tongueless and Seraphina, that I was like, these characters have a lot of things to contribute to this story. And now they're both dead. And we're only that far into the book. So, which makes me very nervous because I'm like, there's a lot of book left. Who else are we going to lose? Because I know they're not the only ones. And the other thing is, I really hope I really hope that Severo comes back in this book, because it will truly be a dark age if Severo is completely absent from the book. Okay, so I just finished chapter 16, and like, that's the first Lysander chapter that, wow, like really hit me. It's right after Seraphina dies, and he finally converges with Darrow. And also, can we just talk about the fact that Ajax betrayed Lysander, and the fact that Lysander was surprised by that? Like, I get old honor and old friendships and all that kind of stuff, but really, he had to have known. Like, the fact that he was so, oh, he would never, like, we're friends. Honestly, that was really intense, and Lysander's face just got burnt, so I have no idea what's going on. Okay guys, I am officially in part 2 of Dark Age now. And weirdly, when I first started part 2, I start reading the chapter, which is my first Virginia chapter, and I'm like, I've read this before. So I flip back to the prologue, and it's a repeat. Like, I understand that in this chapter he's going to keep going, I would assume, but he literally just took the prologue and repeated it in chapter 18. Now, I'm a big fan of prologues. I think prologues are great when they're done well. I really don't like the idea that the prologue is just a repeat of a chapter we read in the book. That bugs me. I don't like that. Because I went back and I looked at the prologue again, and then I just started reading the first chapter, and I was like, why didn't we just start here? Really, the punch to Virginia's first chapter hits really well in chapter 18. It's a good place for us to be like, oh my gosh, like, you know, the prologue really doesn't do anything by being there. It's not different. It's literally just a repeat. So anyways, I just wanted to, like, from a writing standpoint, I'm not sure why we did that. Prologues should be something that you don't get in the rest of the book, or a character that doesn't have a POV in the rest of the book. Like, there are ways to make a prologue really helpful and impactful, but that wasn't it. So I just wanted to rant about that briefly. I will say that was a lot of military tactics. That was like 146 pages of just straight military planning and execution and tactics and people dying. And I love military stories. And that was like, my brain was starting to go a little mush at the end. So I'm actually glad that we're switching over to Virginia now, because I think I need a bit of an environment shift for a little bit. And I'm hoping we might get a glimpse of Severo, maybe at some point. If he's not in this book at all, I'm going to be so upset, you guys. Anyways, I will check back in later. So I wanted to try a new spot for vlogging, and this is my rhubarb patch. Welcome. I'm about a third of the way through Dark Age. And first of all, the thing that I want to say first is that Severo's back, and I could not be happier. I could not be happier. And the discussion that he has with Virginia surrounding the Duke of Hands, that whole scene was just delightful. It was just delightful. And it shows how well she knows him, and I think it shows how smart of a character Virginia is. And I've been waiting for a moment like that in both books, Iron Gold and Dark Age, and I was like, where's Virginia? Mustang's back, y'all. Like, I loved that scene so much. So I'm hoping we continue with that. Also, when she's talking to the Duke of Hands, something that Pierce did really subtly that I thought was awesome is the only time Virginia does not mock him or pretend like she knows what he's gonna say, etc., is when he makes the comment about the sexual abuse that he has suffered in his life. And I don't remember the exact phrase, but Virginia says something about no one should take that from him. Like, she says nothing, she lets him say his piece, and then they go back into the conversation, because it was very subtle, but the way that Pierce wrote that little bit between the two of them during their whole conversation and interrogation was just, yes, that. Beautiful, loved it, amazing. Victra now is the character, I think, that I'm like, Victra just seems like she's kind of a, loose cannon doing whatever. I don't know what's going on. A lot of things are happening in this book very, very quickly, and I don't feel like they're being explained or transitioned into very well. I'm still enjoying this. I would actually say at this point, I think I'm enjoying Dark Age more than Iron Gold, but it just feels like everything's just happening so quickly, and there's so many details that I'm having a hard time keeping up a little bit because the transitions are a bit jarring. Maybe that's just me, but anyways, I'm about a third of the way through the book, and I'm gonna try and crush through it the next couple of days, but I just wanted to update you guys and let you know where I was at. So when I started this book, I thought, okay, it's dark. Like, there's war going on, people are dying, but I'm not seeing the fact that everyone freaks out and is like, this is a dark book yet. I rescind that. I'm not okay. Publius just took over the Senate and let the mobs loose. And I read a lot of books with a lot of heavy content in them. But one of the things that I think terrifies me the most in any book I ever read is the mindlessness of mob mentality. There is something so incredibly insidious and terrifying about that for this reason exactly. Because they can't think. They're whipped into a frenzy by a singular idea and dehumanize everyone outside of them. And I think the reason it's so terrifying is because it's so real. Like, it's so easy to see how things like this can happen with humanity. We do see it oftentimes on the internet, but happens all the time in the physical realm too, and it's just absolutely terrifying. And Daxo's dead, Dancer is dead, characters are dropping like flies. Virginia is definitely not dead because there's absolutely no way Pierce would kill her, but it doesn't matter because the fact that she's been torn to shreds, you expect that of Darrow, but Virginia's always been the pillar of what gold could be. And seeing her torn to shreds by this mob was probably one of the most disturbing things I've read in this entire series. Part of the problem is everybody's split up. Severo's over there, Darrow's over there, Virginia's over here. They're all split up. And could Cassius come back at some point? That would be great. That'd be great. My stomach's in knots, honestly. My stomach is legitimately in knots at this point in the book. I'm not even halfway through yet, and I'm just, what is happening? What is happening? I'm about halfway through the book, Now, one of the things that I am struggling with a little bit is I feel like this book is basically just breaking down all of the characters that we knew in the first trilogy. They're losing a lot of their loyalty. Sephi feels very weird to me in this book. Victra, I've lost Victra. Like, yes, I know that she's a vengeful, terrifying human, and I love her for it. But she's acting like a 5-year-old child, and it makes no sense. Especially where, I don't know, like, it just feels really out of character for her. I'm lost with Victra, which hurts my heart because she's one of my favorite characters. I don't like where Pierce Brown is taking her. I'm feeling like some of these characters it feels more plot driven. That's what I'm gonna say. This Iron Gold and Dark Age both have felt more plot driven. And obviously for me, that's not necessarily what I want in a book. Feels way more that way than the original trilogy, which was incredibly character driven. And now all of a sudden I can see the plot beats and we need to go here and here and here. And this character is gonna get us there. There's been a lot of convenience in this book and a lot of things that just happen to happen because, and oh, look at that, that's convenient. It just happened that way. And kind of a domino effect of those things. So I don't know. We'll see. I'm with Ephraim. Sephi is about to go to war. So let's see what happens. Okay, so now Freihild is dead suddenly, and the Volsung Fa introducing a new contender in the midst of Sephi already, having this plan to take over the mines, and she's got Pax and Electra. There's a lot of stuff going on there. It's a lot. I don't know. There's too many things being introduced here. The number of just sudden deaths is getting to a point now where I'm just I feel like he's cutting ties with characters that might have had interesting storylines, which is fine. I get that that's part of the atmosphere of the story, and yeah, that would happen realistically. It's just there's a little bit of that emotional burnout happening where I'm just like, okay, I don't get emotionally invested in the characters he's introducing because I'm like, they could die randomly in 5 chapters. I don't know. I've got that much left, and I just kind of feel mentally overwhelmed at this point. All right, we need a front porch sit-down chat. It's morning, my hair's crazy. It is what it is. There's too many things that I want to say about this. I'm over halfway through. Wait, where's my bookmark? I'm over halfway through. And this is just messy. It feels messy. I feel like Pierce Brown is introducing too many new threads. It's feeling very convenient, and I feel like compared to the original trilogy that we're being held at arm's length from these characters. And it's definitely feeling a lot more plot driven than the original trilogy did. And there's a lot going on, which is fine, but I feel like so much of the transition between the original trilogy and what's going on here, we desperately needed and didn't get, because the characters are acting in a way that doesn't make sense. Victra's a lost cause at this point. Sephi makes no sense, and we needed something to show where we got to this point. And I'm looking back at the original trilogy and I'm thinking of Roke's betrayal, right? There was a build-up to that. We saw it coming. We saw them slowly drifting apart, Roke making his own decisions, going his own way. And so the moment of betrayal hit so much harder because we watched it happen. With this, it feels like the characters are just doing things and we're just kind of being pulled along for the ride. And I just got to chapter 47. And I need to say this because my suspension of disbelief is pretty high for these books. But Lyria is in her cell we're not going to talk about the way that Victra's handling this because I have so many issues with Victra's character in this book. Lyria, okay, they're writing letters. She and Volga are writing letters back and forth on their jumpsuits to each other. By biting their thumbs, nice Shakespearean nod, by the way, biting their thumbs and then using the blood to write letters. Okay, I can see like a couple of words back and forth, but I get to chapter 47 and it's showing the letter that Volga just sent to Lyria, and it's like this whole thing. And just from that wouldn't, like, how? First, my blood clots really fast, and so I would get a letter out, maybe, and trying to write letters that small, because you're going to run out of jumpsuit real quick. Otherwise, it's going to look like, a kindergarten alphabet board. It's so unrealistic and weird. And Lyria, I'm not going to lie, I was kind of disappointed to see Lyria show back up because I don't find her POV necessarily helpful to the story or interesting. I don't like her as a character. So that, and then to have this incredibly unrealistic, like, we're gonna write each other letters in blood on our jumpsuits with our thumbs, and it's like these long letters. I'm just, what? I don't know, guys. This feels very messy. This book feels incredibly messy. This whole thing with the Volsung Fa coming after Sephi now, there's too many things, and I feel like he's not fleshing out the threads that he gave us in the beginning, and now he's just adding a whole bunch more, and I'm gonna try and get through a bunch of this book today because I would like to finish it. Like, I'm at a point now where I just want to be done, and I've heard that there's a huge cliffhanger at the end of Dark Age and that I'm gonna want to go straight into Lightbringer, but we'll see. I don't know. Like, look at this, you guys. These are being written on jumpsuits with a bit thumb. What? I'm so confused. Well, Theodora's dead, apparently. So that happened and is very uncool. This is such a mess, you guys. Like, what? But Virginia's still alive, which, like, isn't shocking, but I'm waiting for another Here Comes the Cavalry moment with her, because we've had a couple already. There's a lot of those happening in this book. The whole, like, and suddenly someone was there to save them. There's no way Virginia dies. There's no way. You know what we didn't need in this story? You know what we really didn't need was a clone of Adrius Augustus. That was a thing that literally nobody needed. Nobody needed. And I really wish that Pierce was fleshing out the characters that he did still have in the story and the setups that he's made in Iron Gold with them and the conflicts we've already set up, instead of just, like, throwing everything in the kitchen sink into this book, because I didn't need that. I didn't need the Jackal to come back in any form. And also, the problem with this is, up to this point, cloning, like, we've talked about characters being grown in test tubes and that kind of stuff, but cloning really hasn't come into the story as of yet. And I was completely okay with that, because this poses more problems than anything else. Because if cloning is possible, in this world to this extent, you can't tell me that the Jackal is the only person in this highly advanced technological world to figure out how to clone himself. Why has this not become a thing with other characters, with enemies trying to clone? I mean, Severo and Darrow's DNA is splattered all over like multiple planets at this point. So I really feel like Pierce is writing himself into a massive corner here. I do not want a clone of Adrius in this story. I want to develop and flesh out the conflicts with the characters we already had. Stop bringing everybody back. Oh my gosh. So yeah, the whole plot line of this feels incredibly clunky to me. And it's so scattered, and there's so many things being poured into this book that are unnecessary, in my opinion, and taking away from what he was setting up in the beginning of Iron Gold through the beginning of Dark Age. The conveniences were there in Iron Gold a little bit, but Dark Age has just taken it to a completely new level. And Lysander, Lysander shouldn't be alive at this point, if we're all being honest with ourselves. I have no idea how he's still alive. This is such a plot-driven book, you guys. It is so plot-driven. And as somebody who is a incredibly, devoted, character-driven reader and writer, for all of the people that told me that Dark Age, the second series and specifically Dark Age, were more character driven than the original trilogy, y'all are smoking something, because no, it's not. This is so plot driven. And like the scene where Darrow walks into Severo's sealed compartment and springs the booby trap and has this reflection moment. I'm really frustrated that we are getting nothing when it comes to all of these characters that were set up in the first trilogy. I don't know how we got here. Everyone's split up. Nobody's talking to each other. There's betrayals and conflicts and things galore. And I feel like we needed more of a transition between the two series, because this just kind of feels like it jumped too fast and we're missing a lot of pieces. So anyways, that's where I'm at. Severo is now captured. So I'm waiting for the end of Dark Age. Everybody says the end of Dark Age. Oh my gosh, the end of Dark Age. So I'm like, watch Pierce Brown kill Severo, but use a resurrection trope and not actually kill Severo, and reveal in the beginning of Lightbringer that, oh, by the way, Severo's not dead. I don't know. At this point, I'm not loving this book, you guys. I love these characters. I love Pierce Brown's writing. I love the worlds that he's created. I love this so much, but this book, hands down the weakest in the series for me so far. Hi guys, welcome to the end of the vlog. So you probably are wondering why I got to about 75% in Dark Age and the vlog just stopped. So it's been a week since I finished this book. Usually I try to film these outros pretty quickly after the book is over. This one honestly put me into the worst reading slump I've been in a little while here, and I just needed some time to recharge, recenter, gather my thoughts, because I was all over the place when I finished the last page of Dark Age. So this book, what happened at the 75 to 80% mark that kind of threw the entire locomotive off the tracks was the death of Severo and Victra's infant son, Ulysses. Victra had just given birth, and I was actually really impressed with the birth scene itself, because usually I'm not. As a doula and as a mother of three, I find that birth is very often portrayed completely unrealistically and sensationalized and all of these things. And so whenever I come across a birth scene or anything having to do with motherhood that I feel like is actually portrayed in a way that makes sense and is realistic. I'm very impressed by that. So Victra had just had this birth scene, and I was, for just a minute, I was like, I'm seeing a moment of that character-driven depth that I loved so much in the original trilogy, and I feel like I'm connecting with Victra again. And then Lyria walks out of the house for like 5 to 10 minutes, and somehow within that time the Red Hand just happens to find them and just happens to have an entire, like, I'm assuming, flat out brawl with Victra, which Lyria somehow doesn't hear. It just kicks off into all of these things where Lyria tries to go after them and tries to get caught up with Victra and help. But instead what she finds is Victra's newborn son dead and nailed to a tree. Now, I want to stop there because I talked a lot in the vlog, especially the second half of the vlog, about how a lot of what was happening in this book didn't feel earned. It felt like we were rushing headlong through this story at a breakneck pace. The things that were happening felt like there wasn't any lead up, the emotional impact wasn't there. And what I mean by that, and I've talked about this with a couple of other books, for me there's a huge difference between emotional impact and emotional burnout. If we had had build up and a lot of different things going on up to the point where Victra's son lost his life, maybe it would have felt earned. But instead, I look at it from the perspective of, does this change anything about Victra? Does it make her suddenly go off the rails and become a raging vengeance monster? Well, no, because she kind of already is. Does it change Sevro's trajectory in any way? It has nothing to do with the fact that the content in the book is dark. Everyone warned me about that. So many of my favorite novels are very dark books with very heavy emotional impact that takes a lot out of you to read. But the how matters. How that content is portrayed and written matters. And for me personally, the conveniences, the heavy overuse of tropes like here comes the cavalry, and the gratuitous shock value that it turned into after a while just became nauseating, and not for the right reasons. Like, the content in and of itself is nauseating. There are so many horrific things that are happening to these characters, but the way that it was portrayed felt so cheap, and it felt so like it wasn't setting up anything. It was just being thrown at us constantly. The other thing that I want to mention is the body count in this book. And like, before anybody says anything, I understand. We are in a all-out war story. So yes, people are going to be dropping like flies. I understand that. But the problem is, when you utilize such heavy plot armor for some characters and then other characters you just kind of toss out like yesterday's newspaper, it loses any of the emotional impact, and you're just like, really? Really? Okay. We're not even going to talk about Sephi's death. Like, and Ephraim, like, okay. We're not going to go there. That whole scenario was one of the ones that was like, and then this happened because, and then suddenly Volsung Fa shows up because why not? And Sephi's whole arc just was such a mess. And anyways, I don't know, you guys. I could sit here for hours, but that's all I'm going to say about that. In Iron Gold, did not mind the number of POVs. I thought it was okay. In Dark Age, the problem became that there were too many POVs, and there aren't actually that many, but there were too many for all of the different things that Pierce Brown was trying to do in this book, and it started to fall apart because he would bring up all of these different threads and start establishing a certain plot line, but then we jump away so quickly, and there was never any time to develop anything, and it didn't feel like I was allowed to immerse or invest in any of the threads that were going on. Lyria as a POV character I didn't love in Iron Gold. She was my least favorite. In Dark Age, she felt basically obsolete, to be perfectly honest. By the time we got to the part where Lyria is busting the Red Hand sex trafficking ring, it just became ridiculous. Like, I just got to that part and I was like, okay, I guess. Like, it was just the things that were happening through this book got more and more ridiculous, more and more gratuitous and shock value, and just like, really, why? And I just feel like this book takes such a severe turn away from everything that I loved about the story in the original trilogy. Iron Gold was fine. I didn't love it, but it could have easily been saved, I think, by the threads being brought into Dark Age and continued and fleshed out and deepened, but they weren't. And so Dark Age, to me, also cheapened the experience that I had in Iron Gold, because despite the fact that I really, really did not like this book, I have a lot of optimism for Lightbringer. I still have faith that Pierce Brown can do something amazing with the second half of this series. This is by far the weakest link of the Red Rising series so far, in my opinion. From a writing standpoint, it is a mess. Like, this book is such a mess. And the over-reliance on plot armor and just convenience after convenience after convenience. It was like this long string of, and then this just happened to be there, and then this person just happened to show up, and then this just happened to get leaked, and then this, it was just nonstop through the entire book. Lysander should be dead. There is no reason why Lysander should still be alive. And I still don't like I really didn't like his POV in this book. He kind of lost his charm for me at the end of Iron Gold, and it just continued into Dark Age. The one thing that I will say about this, and I can't remember if I mentioned it in the vlog or not, but the scene that I think was one of my favorites in here was the one where Severo and Virginia sit down outside the interrogation chamber where they have the Duke of Hands. And they just kind of have a moment where they reconnect with each other as allies and friends. And it was like this moment of fresh air where I saw the characters that I fell in love with in the first trilogy. I saw them realistically as people who are 10 years older than they were at the end of Morningstar, who have been through all of this crap, who have the weight of galaxies on their shoulders. And this very human, very intimate conversation happens between the two of them. And I was like, there it is. So I know it's in there. I know it's in there. But I'm really hoping that that was what Pierce Brown went out to find in between Dark Age and Lightbringer. I will be waiting a month to read Lightbringer just to give myself a little bit of space in between the experience with Dark Age and moving into Lightbringer potentially in August. So look out for that. I still will be moving forward in the series. But the experience that I had with Dark Age really soured my experience with the original trilogy a lot during the first couple of days after I finished the book. And that's one of the reasons I didn't film my outro right away. After that, I was able to compartmentalize them a lot more and say, you know what? Even Pierce said he wasn't thrilled with where the story was going after this book. I think that I appreciate in all of this the reminder that books are subjective, and every person's going to have a different experience with every book. So for all of the people who absolutely loved this book, I'm really, really happy for you guys. And for those of you who are like me that really had a hard time with it, I see you and I get it. But do I still believe that Pierce Brown is a phenomenal author with the incredible talent for characterization? Yes. I just wish I had seen the true Pierce Brown that I know who created the original trilogy more in this book. So just a thought that I was having as I was working through my emotions about this book was the idea that, you know, one book that I really disliked within this series isn't going to change my opinion of the fact that the author is incredibly talented and created some characters that will stay with me for the rest of my life. So that is the end of my Dark Age vlog. I hope that you guys enjoyed this, and I hope that you guys are all enjoying your experience with the Red Rising books if you have gotten up to this point. And outside of that, I just hope you guys are reading some amazing books this week. I hope you're having a good day, and I'll see you in the next video.